So, monitoring is an important and often overlooked aspect of administration. How do we do that in vCenter? Stay tuned to find out.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to VMware VCP DCV, updated for vSphere 7. I'm your host, Mike Roderick, and with me today is the one and only Mr. Adam Gordon.
Hello, everybody.
So, Adam, tell us, what are we talking about today?
So we're going to take a look at exactly what Mike was talking about in the intro. We're going to take a look at monitoring. How can we be proactive and understand what's happening with our resources in the vCenter server appliance in particular? We'll focus on showing you through the management interface how to check on the health of the appliance. Very important to know if we're running out of resources and if everything's okay. We're also going to define some pesky terms that people often get confused about. Tasks and events. We're going to differentiate between them, show you where they are, make sure you understand how to use them effectively to make sure that ultimately you're not only managing vCenter, but it stays healthy, and if it's not, you have evidence of it and know how to deal with it.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right, well, let's start with the beginning there. What do we mean by events?
So when we think about events, what we're talking about are exactly that, just things that have happened. Maybe it's Mike logging in to the vCenter appliance using the vSphere client so he can start administering. Maybe it's one of you logging into that same vCenter appliance with a different logon, a different username, and you've got a restricted role, right? A defined role that lets you just be a VM administrator. You're administering virtual machines, and you're logging in, taking a look at several hosts, and perhaps performing some maintenance tasks on those VMs. Maybe you're vMotioning one. Maybe you're going to clone one and set up a new VM for a new workload that's going to run, whatever it is. Those are all going to be events that we have evidence of. You engage in some activity. We record that activity, and then we put it into an environment where, number one, it ultimately gets stored right in the vCenter database, the database that backs the vCenter appliance, the Postgres SQL database. That's where we have evidence of all that. But we don't expect you to go into the database directly and start looking for that stuff. So we have an interface where you actually can see those events, and they're categorized, much like the events would be in Windows. Mike always brightens up when I say Windows. If you think about the event viewer in Windows, and we have security logs we can see, we have application logs, right? We have different kinds of events that take place and are categorized, but we also have informational events, warnings, critical issues that happen where maybe we're running out of resources. Any and all those things will also show up here inside vCenter as we look at events. So we'll see them when we go take a look.
Awesome. Yeah, always very important, having that record of what's going on, because you're familiar with what you did maybe when you connected to the vCenter, but what about all those other people that are connecting? Need to know what's going on, and as you said, with the system itself as well. All right, so Adam, let's events. What about tasks? How do we differentiate between those two?
Sure. So tasks are also pretty common. When we think about it, we use tasks, interact with them, and perform them on a regular basis, but we don't always stop to really think about what they represent. VMware calls tasks actually two distinctly different things. Tasks that have already occurred are just that, they're tasks, and we see evidence of them. They're called recent tasks in the viewing area at the bottom, typically, of our interface in the vSphere client. I've pointed them out in a couple of prior episodes. We'll show you where they are again. It varies based on the object we're looking at, but they always wind up at the bottom typically. And there may or may not be recent tasks, depending on how long it's been since we've done something on that object. Tasks that have not happened yet, that are going to happen, are called scheduled tasks, things that we set up that typically we want to put into the system and at some point have either something happen or an action take place or whatever that may be. But we set them up and schedule them. So VMware calls them scheduled tasks. They are things that we are going to want to do, some sort of activity, but we're going to hand off that activity and allow the vCenter appliance, and as a result of that, the objects interacting with it at that level hierarchically, perform those tasks when the time comes. And we'll show you where we see those and how to set up a scheduled task.
Awesome. All right, well, I think I understand the difference then between events and tasks. Now, when I'm dealing with these, do I have a graphical user interface that I can work with? Is it command line? How do I work with this?
So we do have the option to do either. We're going to take a look, and join me here, by the way, while we're talking. We'll take a look at the graphical user interface. It's the vSphere client logged into the vCenter appliance. This is the traditional way most of you are probably going to interact with events and tasks. We always have a command line option. We can always use the vSphere CLI, the command line interface. We'll be taking a look at that to do some monitoring in just a couple of minutes. I'm going to show you one of the two tools from the command line that we often will use to do some health monitoring, checking on what's going on currently. It's called ESX Top. So we'll take a look at that. But we do have a command line option. But like most command lines, it may be a little bit more involved to be able to go in and set up tasks, to download and look at information. So the graphical interface is usually a safe bet. And on the exam, it's usually the place where you're going to be asked to spend the majority of the time answering questions. So I've logged into the vSphere client. We're on the vCenter appliance right here, and we can see that because we're on the Summary tab. I'm going to zoom in just a minute, and I'm going to show you on the Summary overview where we can see some general evidence of health and the health status of the vCenter appliance first. Just to quickly get that out of the way, it's at the lower right-hand corner, right in that tile where it says Health Status. But we're not going to really see anything to speak of, so we're just going to quickly look there. Note that we have to go to the Appliance Management Interface to truly see the health status, and then we'll do that in a little bit. And then I want to go in to the Monitor tab to the right of Summary, and I want to actually begin to talk about events and tasks and show you where they are. So let's zoom in and begin our little journey here. We're on the vCenter appliance, as you can see right there. There's our Summary tab, the Monitor tab just to the right of that. We'll go there in a minute. And if you look at the lower right-hand side of the screen, right as I zoom over, we'll see health status right down there. And what I was going to show you is that we only really get just an overall health rating, right? White circle, green check, good indicates, okay, things seem to be okay, but there's really no detail here to speak of. And the only thing I have is a link that says Appliance Management. If you click on that, that will take me to another tab. It'll open in the browser, and it will simply take me to the logon page for the Appliance Management Interface. We'll be going there in just a little bit to take a look at the actual health status indicators and the monitoring that we can do to check and to see whether vCenter appliance is indeed healthy, but we do that from the Appliance Management Interface. But before we go there, I want to go over to the Monitor tab. I want to quickly take a look at these events and tasks that we were talking about. Now, as we take a look up under here, I'm going to roll up the issues and alarms area. We're not worried about those right now. We'll talk about alarms in another episode later on in the course. But right below that, we see tasks and events. And sure enough, we have an indicator of each. And when I click on one or the other, I will see events, things that have happened, tasks, things that I've either done or want to do, right? Very simple, straightforward, easy way to think about those. And when I do that, I'll be able to, let's just come over here and let me click on events. We'll see that we get a listing of them. Depending on how many there are, I may be able to next or previous through a bunch, depending on how many show up and how many there are. And I highlight one. As you can see, I get some information and a summary of it down below here. The interface is a little bit small. It's sometimes hard to navigate through and see things. You may have to resize the window. You can see I can move it up and down. I can change the magnification, right, to see things. So as I do that, I will click on, looks like I have about 100 items overall, so there's going to be several pages of this stuff, but I can highlight any one of these, and I can see some general information. Let me just see if I can raise this up just a little bit there. And I can see some general information down below here. That shows me whatever this particular element is. It looks like it's an informational event that has happened. I can see, as I move in here, user vSphere local, and it gives me some information about that. Logged in as, and it tells me this looks like it was probably one of the vCenter. It says VPXD, so it's one of the extension daemons, one of the services that's running, that's logged on probably as an account that's managed by the vCenter appliance itself, executing some sort of activity. And so we're just seeing evidence of that. It says there are no related events. If there were, there would be a link there, and I can interact with them and click around. And it's just a simple notation of something that happened behind the scenes that I probably had no knowledge of, because I wouldn't know these daemons, these services are interacting and doing things unless something goes horribly wrong and they cause a fault of some kind. But they're working all the time, right, behind the scenes. And so we're seeing evidence of that. Now, the other thing that's nice here is that I can go in and let's say under one of the column headers, it depends by column, of course, But you'll see that I can go in, I can modify this columnar view like I can in most interfaces. I can add or remove columns, even reorder them if I want to. That's the one at the top. But I also have this filter option, right? And I'm going to bring Mike back in for just a second because Mike and I have talked about this in some prior conversations. Filtering, I know you're a big fan of filtering, right? Especially in an area like this where there's maybe 100 or more entries, right? And you may be looking for stuff.
Yeah, when you start looking at event logs, obviously very important that we go in there and we look for things. And when you have hundreds, and this is a small environment, when you have thousands and hundreds of thousands of entries, being able to filter is key to find what you're looking for quickly. I mean, you don't want to go line by line by line looking for something.
Not unless you're an intern. Absolutely not. So you don't want to do that. All kidding aside, you never want to do that. But the reality is, right, filtering is going to be a really powerful tool. So this is like a pro tip, right? Like a real world tip for you, right? Mike and I both, and we're going to do the Windows 10 thing, Mike. Thumbs up on this one, right? Because it's a really good thing. And it's one of those hidden little gems that you don't really think about in the interface, because in a lot of the Microsoft interfaces, they have a little filter icon. You can clearly see it. You understand it's there. It's not here. It is, but it's just buried. You just got to know to look for it. So definitely take advantage of that filtering capability. It'll help you in the real world. All right, so we see just evidence of that. Now, I mentioned recent tasks, and since we're going to just now go in and take a look at tasks in a minute, let me start with recent tasks. Right down here at the bottom, I'm just going to bring that area up so that we can see it. Let me just do that. And let me see if I can raise that up just a wee bit. It's always a pain to catch it and see if I can bring it up. There we go. And you'll see right down here, I'm just going to, whoops, I always do that. 1 second. Do that at least once an episode, or perhaps even once a show, I should say. Hit the wrong combination for zooming and I get the timer. You'll see recent tasks right here down at the bottom. And sure enough, I do happen to have a recent task. In this case, it says check new notifications that occurred. Usually the system will check every hour or whatever it is by default. And so we'll see evidence of that. Now, this will clear itself over time, and depending on how often I check and how often tasks, things that are scheduled to happen that do occur are occurring. I may or may not see anything here. So this is just the recent task view. I do see it completed. It looks like it completed successfully. Green check indicates that that status is good. And I can highlight this, and I can certainly look at it, but there doesn't really appear to be much in the way of information here other than just telling me that it did indeed complete successfully. We're going to drop that back down, just get that out of the way, and use that real estate to see what's going on here a little more effectively. And I'm going to go up here. I'm going to go take a look at tasks now. Now remember, we're on the vCenter appliance itself, which is the top of the hierarchy. We call this the root object in the hierarchy. And I can see tasks here as well. These are tasks that have already taken place. And we can see here, check new notifications. That was the recent task we just saw. And it says completed, and we see some information about it down below. It shows us what it did. If there is a related event, it will show the event entry so we can correlate tasks and events and see how they relate to one another. So that's important. And there are linkage elements here, so I can click through and connect to the object that this task was focused on if I choose to, navigating right from here if I want to. I can page through here using the next option, as you see, same way in which we can do that in events, so we can just kind of keep going. Looks like I have about 100 of these as well, so it's roughly going to be about the same amount. I can highlight any one of them, bringing it up, and if there is something there, I will see whatever it is. These are just going to all be the same. They're all checking new notifications every so many minutes. So these are tasks, and this is just essentially a read-only view. So these are tasks that have already occurred. I mentioned the tasks that occurred are here. We see them as recent tasks, and they wind up in this interface. But I differentiated. Instead, we also have something called scheduled tasks. Let's take a look at how we could set up our own tasks that we want to ultimately have happen and then track. That's going to take us to a different place. So let's go over here. I'm going to come down to one of the objects a little bit lower in the hierarchy. I'm going to go to my host, SA-ESXi01, for instance. And on that host, we've got a bunch of virtual machines, additional objects. I'm going to come over here to monitor. Okay, it's the same place we were on the vCenter appliance. And I'm going to come down here, and sure enough, I do see under tasks and events, I do see the same entries. I see a tasks entry and an events entry. I can see tasks specific just to this one object. Every object has its own tasks that may occur as a result of being focused on that object, and every object has events that will occur associated with it. And I can see them here, and I can interact with them the same way. In addition, I can see performance information if I want to monitor for that. We'll look at that in another episode. But what I'm going to do is come over here to Configure. And under Configure, again, on the host object, I'm going to come down here and all the way down. It happens to be at the bottom in this particular area for configuring on the host. I see at the very bottom. I'll zoom in so you can see it. I see Schedule Tasks right below Alarm Definitions. And this is where I go to create a task that I want to launch focused on this particular object. So when I come here to New Schedule Task, the only task that is available built in because VMware has provided them for us contextually, tasks that can be scheduled, are scoped to the object in question. I'm on a host. The only thing I can do on a host as a new schedule task is create a new virtual machine as a built-in task. If, on the other hand, I want to go to a virtual machine, different object, right? I want to go to Configure, and I want to go in, and I want to go to Schedule Tasks. Happens to be roughly in the middle of the list. It moves around just depending on the object in question, but it's always going to be on the Configure tab. When I go here to Schedule Tasks, New Schedule Tasks, you'll see, let me just scroll down so we can see, I've got quite a long list of scheduled tasks, again, contextually related to the object in question. To a VM, I can power on a VM, shut down the guest OS, and restart it within the virtual machine, power it off, suspend it, etc. These are activities that relate to the maintenance, care, feeding, grooming operation of the object called a virtual machine. So depending on the object I choose, the scheduled tasks, the list will be different, but we're using built-in tasks that VMware has provided. Again, very important to see that and understand that because you may get asked about that on the exam. So Mike, what are we thinking about tasks and scheduled tasks? We like the built-in aspect?
I do. I like that a lot. You know, it gives me, and as you say, very contextual because those are things that you're looking at now that I probably wouldn't want to be doing to a host or wouldn't make sense to do to a host. So it's good to see that depending on what object you have selected is going to form the list or determine what tasks are available that we can schedule.
Absolutely. All right, so we've seen tasks and events, right? I promised you we were going to take a look at how to see the appliance health by going to the management interface for vCenter appliance. We're going to do that, and I also promised you a sneak peek at the command line. Take a look at ESX top. We'll do that when we get done looking at the management interface. All right, so let's do the following. Let's use our shortcut link here. Let's go over here to Summary, go back to our health status, and let's just be lazy. Click on Appliance Management. Let that spin up the interface for us and bring it up so we can log in. So we'll have that there. I'm going to go ahead and log into the vCenter appliance, the management interface. So let me just type in here really quickly while I'm doing that. And what we're going to see, and Mike and I have taken you into this interface a couple of times throughout the course already, especially in the early episodes back in our very first set of discussions as we were configuring and deploying the vCenter appliance. We did take a look at this as one of the ways to set up vCenter. We see on the Summary tab that we do see the basic information. We've pointed that out, the build and the version, all that. We do see single sign-on status. We looked at that as we joined a domain and brought in an identity provider, so we've seen that. But what we also see right here is health status, and we get a little bit more details: CPU, memory, database storage, and of course swap, all showing good right now. We see the timestamp on the last status check for overall health. So that's really valuable information, certainly a layer deeper than what we were just seeing in the vSphere client in vCenter directly. But as we go behind the scenes here, we can go to our monitor element, one line down from Summary on our navigation bar here on the left. And as we click on that, we're going to see, this is very reminiscent of performance monitoring at a high level. We see CPU and memory tabs, so we see disks, network, and database moving left to right in the interface. And we see that we have a timeline with a graph that is updating and showing us information. I can pull down and go from last hour all the way out to 1 year if I have enough historical data, changing this view on any one of these tabs as a result. And so you'll see, as I go from last hour to a day, a week, a month, et cetera, all the way out to a year. Probably good to know that that's the case, by the way. Let's take a look at a week's worth of data. We see that changes, and I can hover, and I can see information contextually on a certain day and time and see that CPU usage was at 100%. That might be a little bit worrisome, right? And I want to maybe drill in and know why. Maybe I was updating, or maybe I was deploying something, or maybe I was getting ready to restart or coming up from a restart, right, initially. There's a lot of reasons why we may max out at 100% for a very small period of time. And it looks like it was just a blip and it came back down, but it also looks like it happens several times in a row over maybe a day or two. So maybe it's roughly happening contextually because of some update or restart cycle, maybe a task that's taking place. These are the kind of things I begin to look at and want to know more about. And we could do the same thing with disks. You'll see each one of these builds their own charts as we go. Some take a little while to update, so just be patient with it. We could see all of the information associated with disks. Is or are there free space associated with one or more? Go to network. And under network, I'll be able to see information about bandwidth, movement in and out of the system, as well as errors that may have occurred. And on the database area, I could see utilization in terms of space available and interaction with the database, again, over a period of time. All right, so this is how we can tell the overall health of the appliance. Now, we can also check on vCenter and the running processes in real time using the command line. So I want to wrap up our conversations by showing you that. Let me minimize this. And what we're going to do is use a tool that is near and dear to my heart. I know Mike uses it also, and certainly many of you probably use it as well. Putty, right, which is just going to be a interface that allows me to connect to a host and create a command line session. I'm going to putty into, using SSH, right, so a secure connection to one of our hosts, ESXi01. And I'm going to do that in order to be able to log in to the command line interface, to the secure shell that I've already enabled. We've talked about, Mike and I, how to do this in one of our prior episodes. And from there, I'm going to launch the ESX Top tool. ESX Top is built in to the ESXi host. It's available on demand. You just have to have the right credential to use it. There's another version of this tool called ResXTop, ResXTop, that you download as a separate application and can only run from a Linux machine, connecting that machine into the host and then, or the target, vCenter or the host, and then looking at the information there. It's going to look very similar to Top or Proc or List if you're familiar with those tools from Linux, or like Performance Monitor if you're familiar with that from Windows, but without the graphical interface. So let's go ahead and log in. I've got a connection profile already built for my host. I'm just going to click on that to drive the connection. I'm going to just bring this up and center it so we can see what's going on there. I'm going to log in as my root user. I'm going to provide the password. So let me do that. I've logged in interactively. I'm in the ESXi shell, as you can see, logged on as my root user at my host. Now, if you want to run ESX Top, you can certainly do that just by typing ESX Top, but I would suggest for the exam that you look at the help file first. There's a lot of switches, and you may very well be asked about them, so you want to take note of them. It's worth a little bit of time. Use some of that Google foo, right? Go out and Google ESX Top, look up the commands if you don't have the ability to do it in real time in the interface. Make sure you're familiar with that. All right, so let's take a look at ESX Top just running so you can see it. We do see it's providing information on all the running processes, gives us their ID, the name, and all the information on them. It's updating every so often, as you can see, in real time. We see percents used and utilized up there as well as averages. So it gives us a lot of information. It does tell me the number of VMs that are running, virtual CPU, CPU load average, things like that, right? And the uptime in this case on the host is just over 1 day. So it's a very good resource, definitely one you want to explore and take a look at.
All right, Adam, great stuff there. We started talking about how we can monitor vCenter and objects within vCenter. We talked about what the difference was between events and tasks. We took a look at that GUI interface that we could use to look at those events and tasks, as well as a command line option. So we appreciate that. We hope everybody out there enjoyed watching this one. Signing off for IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Mike Roderick.
I'm Adam Gordon.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.